When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some of we shouldn't.
He turned out to be a completely unreliable asshole.
Take it away, boys.
And take it away we shall. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
And hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, as always, to specifically episode 197 of Dismembering Horror, where today I think we have made good traction on our quest to see the sight unseen, to see what disturbs and sticks with you and truly horrifies. That's the quest we've been on, and I think we dug up some good treasure today, and it's in part thanks to, and we're just very happy to have them. We have two guests with us today. We have filmmaker and screenwriter Rachel Kempf. Hello, Rachel.
Hello.
And then author of the book that we're going to be discussing today. I didn't say it yet. It's Threads, Mr. Bob Mielke. Hello, Bob.
Hello, and I'm also a filmmaker.
Oh, yeah.
Great, right. Sorry, I only had horror on the mind. Yeah, great to have you two. No, I was super excited to know that some friends of mine are starting a horror book publishing company, and their first book released was on the film Threads, which we hope you've seen if you're here, but if not, well, thanks for being here all the same. Okay, how do we like to get into it here? I think I like to jump into it with just a trailer, and then we got a lot to talk about.
Yep.
Let's do it. So to set the mood, here we go from 1984. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Got the expert here.
Yeah.
Here we go. Threads.
The United States government has been forced, reluctantly, to take action to safeguard what it believes are legitimate Western interests in the Middle East. We are confident that the Soviet Union will take note of our resolve and will desist from its present perilous course of action.
There's growing evidence overnight from scientists and observers in many countries that there have been 2 nuclear explosions in the Middle East.
In response to today's news of the outbreak of hostilities between vessels of the United States and Soviet navies,
the Ministry of Defense has announced it's sending more troops to Europe to reinforce the British commitment to NATO.
This time, they are playing with, at best, the destruction of life as we know.
Okay, everyone. So Threads. I think we had a Dismembering Horror first here for this episode, where Tim and I sort of have a rule. We don't talk about the film beforehand, but I thought it was apt and not uncalled for. Tim texted me saying that this was the most bleak thing he had ever seen.
Yeah. This is, yeah.
That's pretty bleak,
What
yeah.
more can you say?
And so after the trailer here, we like to rate it. And to do that, we have a rating system where we tell ourselves to avoid, stream, rent, or buy Threads. If we had never seen the film before, speaking all very subjectively. So, Rachel, hearing that someone else put this as the bleakest thing they've ever seen, and knowing when we were talking horror movies, you mentioned this as your favorite horror movie, and when looking for recommendations, it was one that you recommended. So is that true? This is your favorite? And if so, could you include that in your rating?
I'm not sure if it's my favorite. It is the scariest movie I've ever seen. So I want to make that distinction. Mm-hmm. Because, I've seen it a lot. Well, I've seen it. I only saw it for, the first time in the pandemic, early pandemic, which was which was an extra bleak context much to
My
see
God.
it. But it's probably in my like top 10 all-time favorite movies. It's probably like it's in my for sure like top 3 horror movies. But yeah, I do like it quite a bit.
And why is that? What would you tell yourself? Does that mean it's a buy it or?
Probably, it's really hard for me. Your recommendations, like your system, it's interesting because like I have Shudder, so
Right.
so I can go get it anytime I want. And it's also like, it's a movie that even though I just genuinely think is so terrifying, it's not one that you really like yearn to like watch again. But sometimes I just want to get like really high and be like, the world, oh no. Like, in which case I would say buy if you ever want to play the game of like, how scared can I get like really deeply in my heart? And in that case, yeah, but have drugs because that's, have marijuana.
Make it even more intense. Well, in that case, hearing where you're coming from, you might want a hard copy for should, the apocalypse happen in Kirksville.
And a VHS, because they'll get it back running.
Yeah.
Great. And Bob, how about you? Your
First
rating.
I would add that Missouri legalized recreational marijuana, so Rachel isn't saying anything that is illegal to do, at least in this state.
I'm from California. I'm so used to it not even being the teasiest
right.
taboo.
I am also, of course, going to say a buy, but for a different reason. I do not have Shudder. I'm old. You can tell by the gray beard. I pop in Blu-rays and stuff, and the Severin reissue of the film. This isn't a lot of your podcast buys. You don't necessarily talk about the bonus features, but this has really got a great set of bonus features that you get the Mick Jackson director's commentary, which is very informative and not the kind of jive, what we had for breakfast that morning sort of thing that can happen. And a lot of other, and a good interview with Ruth, the actor who played Ruth, Karen Maher. So the Severin did a fantastic job, even though, as you might imagine, the celluloid image can be upgraded only so much, even on Blu-ray, because it has a certain look. But I really like the Blu-ray reissue of it. And I will say that I watched the movie about 15 times, and it does get, it never does, unlike The Day After, it never turns into a comedy, but it does get a little less traumatic after about the 10th viewing. But yeah.
So you have to endure 10 viewings before that happens.
But you have to be in as Rachel said, you have to be in a very special mood to watch it.
That's the yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Got it.
How about you guys? What do you think?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, it's those things where I've said it before, where a movie this, Tim, the perfect word for it, bleak, where I just don't know how much that means I actually want to revisit it. But at the same time, sometimes movies that really get to me, I like want to own them like you're literally owning your fears or something,
exactly.
to know what's so scary. So after hearing your recommendations for the Blu-ray itself, sure, and just how good it is, thinking I want to throw it on for the best possible quality for unsuspecting Ready or Not friends, I'll say buy it.
Oh man,
Tim, yeah.
I really struggled with this concept because I kept thinking to myself, like, I never want to see this again, right? Like, in essence. And it's not because it's bad, and it's not because of anything other than the fact that I don't want to go through the trauma of this movie. And so I was like, okay, well, we keep saying, if this is you telling yourself, what would you do? In that framework, I would say avoid it to myself. But
yeah. By the way, you join a fair number of my students. I showed it in a film class, and somebody responded by saying, there is no reason on earth for this movie to exist, and no one should ever watch it, and it is immoral to show it.
That's
that's strong. I disagree with that.
Yeah.
and here's the big reason I kind of patently disagree is that, like, as a filmmaker, so that was me telling me just Tim, normal Tim. But like filmmaker Tim, I watched this and I go, oh shit, this is actually, there's so much going on from a filmmaking standpoint that like it's almost like it should be required viewing in a way. And so that creates sort of a paradox for me to be like what do I rate it? I mean, it's essentially a buy for the necessity of like that you should use it as a tool to learn how to make something really like scary.
Right.
Or not even just scary, just like there's so much going on from a filmmaking point of view that is unique that I think you should own it in that sense. So I don't know where I land.
Well, I think the closest thing we had, just as far as I didn't think it was going to be beat as far as bleak factor, was Possession.
I know, and I love that movie.
We both said buy it to that.
So, oh, God.
And I think this had a lower budget than Possession.
Probably. That actually is, we'll talk about it, is one of the things that fascinates me the most about this movie, is the fact that how they were able to pull this off astonishes me. Like, I'm eager to hear more about it. So, okay, I'm going to just say, because I'm me, but I'm also me who's a filmmaker, and you can't get rid of that I'll be a buy.
Great. More or less buy it all around.
Great. 3 buys.
Great.
4.
Okay, and
3.
just because I kind of skirted over it too, Bob, here, I wanted to mention you're also an anti-nuclear activist or have experience with that. So wanted to give that context here. And then just to get you, I kind of skirted over this too. I wanted in your answers here for your ratings just to get to know you two a bit better here as our guests. So Bob, yeah, you said you'd buy it for the Blu-ray itself, how great the special features are. So let me pose it this way. Why write the book on Threads for you?
Well, I mean, that goes into this wonderful series that Nick and Rachel are producing, that, modeling on the 33 1/3 book-length studies of vinyl. And what's the name of the series on computer games?
Video games, Boss Fight Books.
Boss Fight Books.
Friend Gabe does.
It seems like a really nice sort of focus, just like your podcast focuses on a film and does a deep dive. I think it's great that we're putting out this. They're putting out this eclectic series of books about horror films, and I guess Rachel, because of my nuclear connections, they immediately thought I was the guy to do Threads, and I'm always willing to write a book about Threads, really. It was like I had all the skill sets necessary to do it. So it was a real pleasure, and I had the luck. I was on sabbatical during the pandemic. It was like the perfect storm. I basically edited our Sigmund Snopek documentary Nick and I have been working on, Nick Tody and I wrote this book. I would do 1 month of editing and 1 month of taking notes for the edit, and 1 month of drafting a chapter.
Great. I'm going to dig deeper
Rachel's
here.
an exquisite editor.
Correct.
Great editing. I'm going to dig deeper here. And so why or how was it a pleasure for you to delve into this film?
Well, I teach an interdisciplinary course on nuclear weaponry. So, I mean, I've been doing nuclear stuff. I mean, my first publication is a 1984 article that I talk about in Chapter 2, An Ethical Taxonomy of Nuclear Representation. Sounds really boring, but it's about science fiction and film, about stuff, the attitudes people take toward that. Later on, I did a really funky article for Film Quarterly out of Berkeley on the nuclear test documentary as a kind of techno-porn. So it really is one of my major areas of scholarship and teaching and research and stuff like that. And I told, when we did the book launch in Milwaukee a few days ago, I told the audience something changed. Growing up in the Cold War, I used to have nightmares about the bomb going off. And then when I started working with this nuclear photographer based in Phoenix named James Sierkiewicz, I started having nuke dreams where in the dream there was a mushroom cloud, and we were like nuke chasers, trying to like get up to it to get the picture. Like, this is a rare opportunity, a live mushroom cloud. Let's go. So I'm a little weird, basically.
Got it. All right.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Rachel, for you, this is a bit of a pop quiz question, but just to get to know you better as a film viewer, I know you're always watching horror films. You're always wearing shirts there representing your favorite horror films. I'd love to know not what is the absolute favorite, but what is a favorite non-horror film of yours?
Ooh, a favorite non-horror movie of mine. I'm gonna seem real lame to you guys, probably. Okay, wait, no. This one I stand behind 1,000%. Beavis and Butthead Do America is like totally in my all-time top 10. It's very good, but I also like love a rom-com. Weirdly, like I used to write rom-coms before. Like I like wanted to write horror movies, and then I was in grad school, like at UT's like screenwriting program, and they were like, "You should write comedies. You're so funny." And I tried that for a while, and now I'm back to scary, back to one. But yeah, getting back to the main point, Beavis and Butthead Do America is an incredible piece of filmmaking. It's a very bizarre movie, but it's just like way funnier and smarter than it should be. Seems weird to call that movie smart, but like there are just things in it. Like they get shown the like they're at the big
Yellowstone.
Yes, Yellowstone. And they're just like, this is how much this geyser shoots out, blah, blah, blah. And Butthead's just like, so? Like, which is the perfect reaction. The like greatest thing anyone could ever say to it. But yeah, there's just very excellent. They meet their dads. Ugh, it's crazy. Like,
great.
Yeah.
I'll revisit it after watching the sequel. We usually ask our guests, what their relationship is to horror and like what, all that. Usually knowing maybe they aren't, so exclusively horror. So I thought for you, I just wanted to flip the switch there.
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, to keep on trucking here, we like to move on with a short summary just to get us all on the same page of how we viewed this film. So our guests, between you two, do you want to kind of let us know what this film was?
Oh, I'll take it away. Okay, so Threads is a movie made by the BBC, like a made-for-TV movie, essentially to like warn people of the dangers of like a nuclear war. And it does that by just showing you the lead up to the incredibly brutal, like lead up to and then the blast, but then the like years, decades after the blast, and the whole movie is like structured so that it's like however many like here's this date, and then it's like you get another date, and they're sorry, I'm not being very coherent here. They keep marking time throughout the movie with the intertitles, so that you don't know when the blast is coming necessarily, but after the blast happens, it's like one day, like 24 hours after the blast, this horrible awfulness happens, and now it's like a month after the blast, and all of the food rations have been seized, and only the people who work get more food, because the less people there are, the more food there is for everyone. So hopefully those weak people die and the rest of us can have like food. They're like years after, like 10 years after, now the children are watching. Their school seems to just be watching old VHS tapes that they managed to get running of just like things that seem to be like, they're watching like a video that would have made sense if kids were like in a museum and they knew what the world was before a nuclear holocaust. But like the fallout of a nuclear holocaust is so bleak that just nobody is talking to each other. They're all just like huddled, trading rats for sex and like eating dead cows for like subsistence. and like
Dead sheep.
Oh, dead sheep. Yes. Eating dead animals for subsistence. The main woman that you're following is pregnant in the lead up to it. The lead up to it is very like COVID vibes, because it goes really quickly from like, ooh, we don't, there's just sort of like planes flying over in the background to like, now the radio is just telling us, or the TV is just telling us how to prepare for our fallout shelter and what to do with bodies when they pile up and where to go. When is it safe to go outside to bury them and all this other stuff. And then like, The Blast is very good. I just want to share that. The Blast is so excellent. There's a point at which it's just showing like flashing light and you're seeing just bodies disintegrating, which is like one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Yeah. But like
top tier.
Yeah, top tier, like all time.
Great.
That's very good. But yeah, it just keeps going for like decades after. And every time it's like another intertitle comes up, it starts to get a little like, like now what is the world like? It can't possibly get any worse, but it just keeps getting worse, and it's very sobering. They really did a very good job. Like Bob talks about it in his book, there's a movie called The Day After that came before Threads that was also like let's warn you of the horrors of a nuclear fallout, but it ends with this card that was like, this is only a depiction of what the horrors would be. In reality, it would be much worse. And it's like, Threads is like the much worse. They're like, challenge accepted. I'll make a much worse version of it to really scare the crap out of you. And I kept reading when I was trying to write the blurb for the back of the book for Die Books. I Googled, and the phrase that kept coming up, and I couldn't find where it was attributed to or who came up with this, was like, it was called the night it aired on BBC as the night Sheffield didn't sleep, or like the night Great Britain didn't sleep. Everyone was too scared, which is just great. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing I would add is that it's not a response to The Day After. It was actually being done before. And in fact, what Mick Jackson says on the commentary, the director, is that he watched The Day After to see if he didn't need to make this film, and he was happy to see that there was still some darkness to explore.
Oh, lots.
Great. Tim, anything you wanted to add?
No, not really. I mean, not that we won't discuss more, I guess.
Right.
Great.
But yeah, we basically follow Jimmy and Ruth, and their two families, the Becketts and the Kempfs. And we follow as the only other real subplot is that urban planner, who's got has the underground, seat of government thing, which Britain thoroughly prepared for because of, lessons learned from the Blitz. So they're ready in a way that most U.S. cities aren't to, have an underground government after it. And of course, Britain is such a target-rich island that they have a totally different mindset toward nuclear war than Americans do. They know they're toast if there's anything.
Great. All right. I think that sets the stage very well here. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone, for that. All right. So then we can move on with our first big section. Let's get into it here with What Worked.
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
My God, where do you even begin?
Well, just because you kind of already mentioned it, Rachel, I feel like I want to mention the text that sort of punctuates the film throughout. It's almost like that Texas Chainsaw quality where it just does, it adds to that stark and bleakness by being so matter of fact. And then sort of similar to The Shining as far as just then having that effect of, it's still going to get worse as we go here. But I thought it was interesting, and what really worked for me is that the narration is doing the same thing as a text, where it's like keeping it in the realm of documentary somehow kind of still, just a little bit, but that British intonation of that matter of factness to have at the beginning, just this sort of reporting of facts sound a certain matter of fact way, and then by the end of the movie it sounds the exact same way. It's just so like, it's like watching a nature documentary on this actually happening, and just that's something, there's I don't know if it's a disconnect maybe, but just something about that. Yeah, I mean, obviously the narrator is not emotionally reacting to what we're seeing, and neither is the text.
Nothing.
The text is just, ooh.
It's the worst thing. It's just like 2 hours of the worst things you could ever possibly imagine, but none of it feels like an exaggeration. None of it's like, ooh, like, you know, you see a like horror movie sometimes and they're like, I'm going to put the like, I'm going to put the like scary noise, and here's the jump scare, and I'm going to really go over the, like nothing. Somehow everything is the worst thing I can possibly imagine, and not at all over the top or being like, it's just like, nope, this is just what would happen. Very matter of fact. And that's always very like, it really gets you.
Yeah, the movie has one big jump scare, a nuclear bomb going off.
Yeah.
Right. I know, and need nothing bigger, God, for just the suspense of leading up to it, and then the horror of the aftermath.
That I think that singularly is like, this whole film is this weird lesson in the dread, like building dread up to, because we know what's going to happen. It's not a secret, right? Like they pretty much say it right off the bat. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is a movie that is ostensibly going to be about the impact of nuclear fallout. And like, that's true, but really the movie is like an hour and a half of like dread.
Yes.
Before the bomb even hits.
Yeah.
And so you're just sitting there, like, that is the effect that had is just me sitting there. I was like wandering around while I watched it, because I'm not sitting down for this. I just have to like pace. Because it's like, it's so much lead up, and I'm like, when is the thing going to actually happen?
Yeah, it speaks to, I think it's kind of like the effect of watching Titanic, where it's like, even though I know what's going to happen, I still get so caught up in the story and the characters, and there's that little part of me that thinks maybe this time it's not going to, crash into the iceberg. And it's the same way watching this, where it just feels like, you just get caught up in that sense where it's so effective. Bob, anything in either not mentioned or mentioned in your book that you just want to put out there, just especially works for you about this film?
Yeah, I'll give you a few things. One of them, and I've gotten more aware of, and this is something that really American viewers aren't going to be as aware of. But there was this whole movement called the British Free Cinema movement that Nick really put me onto that. One of the things that really, I think, made it even worse for British audiences than American audiences was that Barry Hines, and the screenwriter, and Ken Loach, the director, had collaborated on some very serious, depressing working class movies that really aren't horror, but are not exactly a fun ride. Like Kess is the most well-known one, based on A Kestrel for a Knave. The Gamekeeper, and Looks and Smiles. So that is what's giving us that really funky and bleak and dreadful blue-gray, palette, mise-en-scène in the film. And I think that's very effective. I mean, I'm bummed out. At the opening scene, you've got a couple on Lover's Lane, and it looks like shit, I mean, right? It's already depressing.
I love the flower that he gives her.
Right.
It's like the lamest thing ever. It's just
yes, and he wants to watch the soccer match, but apparently he's going to actually fuck her and knock her up. Right? I mean, and it's like turn and the first ominous news comes in, and it's like change the channel so we can watch listen to football, and then Chuck Berry comes on the first of 3 times. Weird. So I love that. I love Karen Maher's performance as Ruth.
Oh, she's good.
She carries the movie. I mean, like that is just a tour de force. And I love the interview, bonus features with her because she's awesome. I like the mystery of Jimmy. Jimmy, we never see Jimmy die, unlike in The Day After where you get some Ray Harryhausen skeleton flashes taking a few people out. Jason and the Argonaut stuff. We don't get that in Threads. Jimmy just disappears. There's a weird, I call the people who really like the film Threads heads. There's a whole, there's a Threads head subculture take that shows up on other podcasts and stuff, that Jimmy is in the end next to Jane when she's dying, when she's giving birth to the stillborn thing, that it's Jimmy on the right. I don't see it. Mick Jackson doesn't say it's there, but I think it's much more effective that Jimmy just disappears.
Oh, yeah.
Right? He's just gone.
Yeah.
I'll reinforce what Rachel said, the endless deferral of the ending, the way it just keeps going on. I mean, it's like the death of 1,000 cuts, waiting for the film to end. Like, please roll the credits. Freeze frame, roll the credits. No, there's more. Ah!
Yeah.
And again, as I hinted as Tim brought up, the practical and low budget effects as opposed to CGI are fantastic. How they stretched a buck. All those radiation burns are ketchup and Rice Krispies. They got a really good bang for a buck. They used a council estate that was going to be torn down to do all their demolition stuff. So they found all kinds of ways to cost cut that any filmmaker wanting to stretch a dollar or a pound, can learn from. And then finally, last but not least, if you look at if you want one image that really captures the horror of the film, it's that woman pissing in her shoe when the first bomb goes off, which is like the only effect shot in the film. Everything else is stock footage. That they actually did some chemicals in a tank to get, but that is like pure cinema gold. And it says it all. And I cannot, The Day After wouldn't touch a scene like that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
And didn't.
Great. Yeah, I liked, as far as you mentioned, I don't know if you just put it this way, but the feel of false endings of just like waiting for the ending and wanting it. The way I thought of it, it just offers zero reprieve in that sense. It's just, keeps going. When you think it can't, it keeps going. And, boy, I mean, actually, since I'm just kind of mentioning it too, wanted to mention about the ending. Where like I had the thought, so I mean, it ends where she's giving birth to her stillbirth baby. It's like, barely looks like baby at this point. It's as horrifying as can be. If the baby had been a healthy baby, the film would still be as horrifying. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be given a sense of hope from a living baby. You'd be still as like down and depressed that now this is the cycle we're in. So to like, I don't know, it's like quadrupling down on something just to have the baby be the way it is. Like,
but her reaction, even if it was a healthy baby, you can justify the exact same reaction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's just, that's the world.
Here's my take on that moment, because like what I love in Threads is that the children of the nuclear holocaust they don't even like really speak English hardly. Like they just kind of talk in this weird like monster, like gimme, like it's so... She's like trying to wake up her mom when she's dead, and she's like, Bruce, work. Like it's not even complete sentences, because no one's just like having a moment of like community or like talking with each other about their feelings or anything. They're like, nope, feelings are gone now. Happiness is over. We're all just cockroaches at this point trying to get through. So for me, I'm like, I don't see a time at which Ruth was ever like, listen here, daughter, let me tell you about what happens when men and women have sex. She's not thinking like, I got to tell you about the miracle of childbirth or the horror of childbirth, as it were. She may not know what's coming out of her. Like when she's giving birth, she might not know what's happening to her. You know,
That's
she might not
interesting.
know it's supposed to be a human. Like, who knows?
Right.
Like, has
And
she
then
seen
the
anyone else give birth? Like, maybe she has, but maybe she hasn't. Like, nobody knows
Right.
what these kids do and don't know. And I just love that.
The idea that then even if she had or does have a baby at some point, it's probably unlikely. It really fills in that missing link of like how we get to the feral kid in the Road Warrior. Where
I
it's
kept
like
thinking about Road Warrior.
Right?
I was like, oh, this is the prequel to Road Warrior.
Well, it's the opening montage of Road Warrior
Yeah.
that sort of gives vague notions of a war that wiped us all out. It's like, oh, this totally sees how this puts us right there.
Damn.
But couple that with Bob. Yeah, I just wanted to second what really worked for me there. You mentioned the style of it. In your book, I really like the term that you use. I'm going to use it all the time now. It's so helpful. Kitchen sink realism is exactly what just makes it so effective, which I think is in Possession too. I think I mentioned earlier. And I have seen Kess is, the one film of his that I've seen, which, it just puts you right there. It really feels like that sort of, I don't know, that what would be the word? That sort of movement in the sort of 70s that you see like William Friedkin does so well, where like extras just feel real. But I mean, the thing that I'm always fascinated by when you pull off that style is that how you retain that realism, but then you also have enough stylistic elements with how it's shot. It seems like just two things that should almost be, I don't know, contradictory, but only work together really well. I don't know. I'm just always so amazed and love it when you can have that kitchen sink realism, yet still apply like filmmaking and just sort of the, whether it's candid angles or just
And what's not there? No crane shots. No bells and whistles. Very much, barely a tripod, handheld.
Yeah, still no bells and whistles, but still very deliberate and effective in its shots. It's coming yet within that kitchen sink realism. It's not just like drop someone in with a 16 millimeter camera and just let them go. You know, you do have to do more intentional filmmaking than that. But yeah, God, incredible. And I thought Kess bummed me out to apply that style to this story.
Yeah.
Like, God, kudos. You can't do it better.
On that note, I definitely, there was one shot that kind of struck me and made me realize, you know, there's a pretty amazing like synergy that they've accomplished between documentary style, hyperrealism, and narrative filmmaking. And like I think in other hands, often you see those three things be too kind of, there's a disparity between them. Like each one is its own style. And in this, they're merging together in a way that makes you forget where you are, like what you are watching. Because there's actually two shots that do this for me. One is Jimmy sitting in the bar, like contemplating what he's going to do. Like he's just found out that Ruth is pregnant and he's drinking a pint and a guy comes up and stands next to him, presumably a friend who's like consoling him or whatever, and takes his beer glass to get him another beer. But you never see that guy in shot. You only see him from about chest down. And it's like where the camera is kind of untraditional. Like normally you would either be like at Jimmy's eye line, so the camera would be sort of table-ish height. Mm-hmm. This is like a foot above that, so we're looking down just slightly at Jimmy, and then that forces us to not be able to see his friend who's standing next to him, right? Like we don't see. I think maybe they cut to that guy at one point, but like in this shot, it's very stark. It's just Jimmy and some guy's body. And they're talking, like they're having a conversation. Traditionally, you would do coverage on that or whatever,
right.
But they don't. And it's this weird amalgamation of like in the moment hyper-realism documentary style, but like we're following the narrative part of this story. And I find that like melding of those things really fascinating. The other one is when, which I love, like this whole scene is amazing to me, is the grocery store scene where the woman is like complaining that prices have gone up, which I'm sure we can all relate to. And the clerk is just so matter of fact about it. He's like, well, then go fucking shop somewhere else, man. Get out of here. And they have this little fight, but then the sirens go off and
Dutch angle.
The utter chaos of them leaving the store, and like specifically that the store exits have like a step down, right? Like they're built so that you don't leave with the cart, right? Like you leave with a bag of groceries and you walk away. And people are pushing their carts over that step, and it's total chaos. And just like the idea of a camera existing in that moment at this time to capture that is sort of this weird, like I said, like this melding of these styles that it almost feels wrong that we're even capturing that moment. But it is what's happening, and like you said, like the Dutch angle gives it even more style, and so it's just a really amazing, like, accomplishment to me to see this merging of these things all working together to really have this overarching effect of just pure chaos and dread.
Yeah, it's getting me thinking, like, it's interesting how it's presented as a documentary, but clearly, you know, it's not. Those are just traditional narrative filmmaking scenes, as is essentially the whole movie, aside from the text and the narration. Yet something about the narration giving it that documentary feel makes this not documentary footage feel more real in that documentary sense. Yeah. Just to go down my list here, I mean, in general, is anything where it's like that authoritarianism that's just unshakable is just so terrifying. And I think what this film does well is it reminds us that they're well intentioned on some level, which makes it all that much more horrifying. Like a scene that really did that to me. When you have the planes, everyone's like in the fields leaving the big city, and you have the military planes, government planes, whatever, yelling at these people to go back to their homes after we've just seen their homes they're all on fire, if standing at all.
And
it's just this kind of like, what was that?
The fire trucks have all left. They've all fled.
Right. And there's no gas. There's no petrol for them to get anywhere anyway. But they keep reminding us of this.
Right. It seemed so apt, where it's like they're in planes yelling that, where it's like this, you can't argue against it. It's just this, it's like doesn't make any sense at all. Like you just want to say, wait, my home was blown up. What do you mean go back to your homes? But you just can't. You just can't. You're so hopeless. Ugh.
I think that reality that they're depicting is kind of the scariest thing, because it's the authoritarian like attempt to keep some semblance of order in a reality that it's over. There's no, like, you can't salvage it. So stop trying. Like this idea that there's an underground government being like, well, we knew this was coming, so like we've got plans in place. Plans for what? Like everybody's dead.
It goes from post-apocalyptic to post-apocalyptic.
Right.
Kind of like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, you know? It's not happy times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the idea that even soldiers are trying to enforce anything, and like that enforcement is also complete bullshit, right? Like they're like, don't run from us or we'll shoot you. For what? Like, what are you protecting at this point?
Right.
It's utter chaos. Like, people are just dying. Like, so what? Like,
Well, the more people
what
they
are you
shoot,
holding
the more
on
food
to?
there is for the,
Right.
for the rest of them.
It's
like
crazy.
musical chairs.
Yeah. I love these scenes too in the sort of the underground bunker, the guys that are like, to this point, like trying to rationalize next steps. And it's like, guys, you're screwed too. Like, I don't know what do you think you're gonna get out of this?
Yeah.
I really love, there's a moment that I am like obsessed with where there's a guy who is like stumbling through. It's like a day. I can't remember how long it is after the blast, but he goes into his kitchen as if like he just like tries the water like and is just not expecting it to work at all because it's been a while, but just tries it anyway. And then the water comes out and he's like, oh, and he goes to like get like a bucket or something. He was so unprepared for the fact that the water might come out. And as soon as he puts the bucket under there, the water like trickles to a stop. Like it's like, nope, it's gone. Like at the exact moment, like now it's gone and you'll never have it again. And you blew it, buddy. Like you could have gotten the last water, but you lost it. It's so like, he's so sad. But yeah, there's all these just like wonderful little moments of like, oh God, I never thought about that. Like they wouldn't have prepared us for that. Or like she has the baby and she's got to bite off the umbilical cord with her teeth. Like,
Oh man.
Right,
When she first started biting into that, I was like, what are we seeing right now? Is she eating the baby? Oh, no. Okay,
Right.
I get it.
she's gotta,
In that zombie schoolroom with the videotape on cat skeletons and skulls. I mean, that's just like twisting the knife.
They just...
Yeah.
But that's just it. That's the whole movie is just like, there's no glimmer of anything being better or at any point, right? Like, oh, I found a puddle of water. It's irradiated. Like, it's going to taste like shit.
A bottle of Coke
like, oh,
even,
we
a bottle
found
of
a sheep.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's just like, there is no, like, there's no upside.
Yeah. Even when Jimmy's dad swigs the scotch, he has to barf it out right away.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
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 So, like, that in and of itself, like, that way, I mean, it's built in, obviously, to the circumstances of the story, but to spend probably how long is there from point of the blast to the end of the movie?
I think the
it's
blast
about
is the
45
midway.
minutes.
I want to say.
Yeah, about like 47, 48 minutes, something like that.
Yeah,
okay.
a little after. Yeah.
So we sit with, once we settle into the fact that the bomb just went off, we spend about 40 to 45 minutes of it just being awful. Mm-hmm. It's not like there's like a reprieve.
No.
It's not like we go, oh, okay, finally they can relax for a second.
Yeah. Even like they have like
it's brutal.
Like one of the cards, because usually it's like the little like inner titles are like to tell you, to just orient you to like, here's how things are going to happen now in that documentary style. But one of them just says December 25th. And that's
I
the
love
date.
that.
So it's Christmas.
Like
and they're
that
just,
tableau is amazing.
They're all just sitting around a fire, totally silent. Ruth's baby is just crying, and everyone's just so annoyed with this cry. Like, they're just blank looks. It's not, this baby isn't like, hooray, my little bundle of joy. Oh, calm down, baby. It's just like the baby cries, and it sucks, but everything sucks, so whatever. And they're all just like silently staring at each other.
But that shot,
right.
is
Psychic
a nativity
numbing.
scene, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it is the nativity scene, like in the manger, like the way it's lit looks like a Renaissance painting.
Yeah, but everybody's got PTSD.
Yeah, and then it just goes
Right.
through each of their just traumatized faces one by one. Yeah, it's really, really something.
And maybe it's me because I'm, just thinking the worst at this point. But I'm like, oh, now they're gonna eat the baby.
There are movies for that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, oh, they cut to these people's faces, and I'm like, they're at the point, right, where
they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
One way to shut the baby up is to, just like have a meal.
Oh,
Yeah, kill two birds
God.
with one stone.
I'm kind of surprised they didn't go there, to be honest.
Yeah. They went everywhere else.
Right?
I feel like I gotta mention again that scene. I think you just brought up earlier, Bob, with the or and Tim too, the school children being shown the video, because you mentioned the cat skeleton being shown. There's something, it's kind of similar to the effect that the matter-of-fact narration is doing, or maybe it's just like this weird meta effect of then seeing people doing it, where we see like, dead pets, and their skeletons, and then now we're seeing it presented now, just the idea that there are skeletons, under animals, if you're thinking sort of kid terms. It's like this, it's like you're trying to present it in this sort of like under the safety of something scientific sounding, like, but for kids. I don't know. There's this I'm just trying to just break
It's
apart
really
that scene
uncanny.
and like all the things. Exactly. It's so uncanny. There's again that disconnect there. So there's that going on with it, and then also just it's so effective, the woman mouthing the words to it too. It's just of the video.
Yeah, it reminds you that this is the only one they have, and they've just been watching it over and over.
Exactly. It's just gets that sense of being trapped or whatever. When something that like should be an exciting movie time, just, I don't know, it becomes like you're just sort of grasping at air almost.
That's a good point, because I think a modern audience right now watching this might be too young to remember how exciting having the TV with a VCR like carted into your classroom. Like that was a big deal. I mean, you all got excited because you're like, oh, finally, like a break in the monotony of school. We get to watch a movie today.
Connection to the outside world.
Right. And this is attempting to do that, but has the exact opposite effect, right? There is no excitement. It's not new. It's not different. It's not a break in the monotony. Ugh. It is the monotony.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what should be making us feel good just becomes less and less so, and becomes a part of the horror. Reading your book, Bob, something else that came to mind, you mentioned, talking about the humor in it, or I guess lack thereof at the same time. Yeah. So there's
all ironic,
right? There's the one that you mentioned there's a billboard that shows like, isn't it like a mother with a newborn baby, and it's all just kind of happy or something like that. What struck me about it is it's ironic, but it's not. It doesn't take you out of the movie like so. As far as like, oh, I'm watching a movie. This is like, it's so obviously I don't know what would be commentary, but it's just also at the same time exactly what would be there. So it stays in that utterly realistic tone. It doesn't break that for me. So it's like, even though it's ironic and one could laugh at it, at the same time, it's not like funny in the sense of you're laughing at the movie, but you're still just in the actual situation of the reality itself.
Yeah,
so,
and underneath the billboard, someone is trading sex for rats.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The basket of rats.
The basket of rats.
That was actually my pitch to Nick for what the cover of the book should be, because I was like, the cover of the book should always be the thing that represents the horror of the movie. And for me, the horror isn't the nuclear blast. It's the horrible, horrible things that will occur, that your life will be after the nuclear blast.
Yeah.
So I was just like, basket of rats, $1, whatever, £1, whatever they were.
Or barter.
Or barter, or sex,
right.
Whatever you got.
So, actually, mentioning the title in your cover here, assuming it worked for you, what worked for you guys about like having the that imagery, the opening imagery of the spider and its web, and then the title of the film?
I'm not 100% sure that the like threads like spider opening like really does it for
save
me.
that then for the next section, possibly.
It's one of the only things that I'm not like. I think I get it, but like I don't think I'm the best. But yeah, I don't know. I'll let Bob.
I like it more, I think, than Rachel does, because I think that that's sort of almost, even though the film was made as a PSA, public service announcement to warn about nuclear, proliferation and buildup and stuff, it seems to me that a part of Mick Jackson's or Barry Hines' brain knew this was a horror film. And so you starting out with a spider is kind of classic and archetypal. I mean, yeah, I'm thinking of like, the Incredible Shrinking Man, and the spider in the basement, I mean, that, to me, the weird juxtaposition of the spider and then the milk truck, this whole milk obsession in the film, milk delivery, that did something for me, because that's like, this is a really weird way to start a film about this subject matter. And the little BBC narrator about, the infrastructure, I mean, that actually makes it weirder. It's sort of like, it's a kind of a WTF telegraph with these conflicting semiotic codes in that opening. You really don't know what's going to happen here. All bets are off. This is going to be a very strange movie.
Right. So the spider definitely works in that sense. And trying to like break apart. I mean, maybe I just kind of like made it work for me just by thinking about it enough, just, assuming something's there, even if it is super open for interpretation. I immediately think of like the threads that we weave, just that phrase. And then spider, just the way it weaves its webs. It's like sort of representative of nature.
To trap and kill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess, that should be the really obvious one.
Yeah.
the trap and kill thing. But just something about maybe the sort of, we don't really think of like animals, insects having a conscious intentionality to them. So it's like this idea that just spiders as representative of nature, I tie a certain like inevitability to just like, again, the threads that we weave. That's I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it's like there's this inevitability. It makes me wonder if it's like on some level, did this have to happen for this version of human history, or does it have to happen? It's like something unavoidable.
Yeah, we're hardwired to having this terrible thing happen.
Yeah, it's in some greater cosmic sense. It's like something as part of nature, just that this has to happen.
Yeah, this is how we roll.
Yeah, and not necessarily like to human nature, but to just our story itself, how we have to evolve. It's a part of that. So again, that part of inevitability too really got to me with the scenes of the preparation, where it really in our, or maybe it's just because it connects so much to our real world of just war and this kind of nuclear conflict, where it's like you bring up, Bob, in the book, this idea of to prepare or not to prepare. It's that feeling of if by preparing you're somehow inviting it to happen, like really gets to me. Like because I really like believe the kind of like we individually and collectively create our reality. So like recession, if that's all we're ever hearing, in the news, and it's all we're ever talking about, that plays a part in putting us there, on top of whatever real world things are going on. It like consciously creates your reality. So just like
self-fulfilling.
That everyone, so this that everyone is going along with it. It almost feels like it's making it happen, and that just really gets to me and puts me imagining there. Like, what would I do? Would I try to just not do it or not be prepared at all? I don't know. It's just
that's right. They have these videos. They have Protect and Survive. They have the plans. It's all been planned for.
Right. It's all been planned for. Like it has to happen. God.
So you're saying this didn't in any way make you want to like go have some sort of disaster like prep kit?
It did and it didn't, And I think that's what I'm getting at. Where I was talking about in horror, there's these contradictory things it brings up.
I do want to say one scene that, because I'll forget if I don't say it now. To this point, in a way, when the dudes are down in the office underground, whatever, and they're talking about food, things that they would like, and then the one guy like they get sort of through listing off a few things, and the one guy just like goes, ah, and like starts like hitting the table. Like, to me, that's the whole sort of thrust of this idea of preparation. Like, because at the end of the day, like, it's once it happens, no amount of preparation is going to bring back the availability of these things that we take for granted, right? Like the ability to go get a hamburger or whatever. And like the reaction he has is like the reaction I was having throughout the whole movie, where I'm just like going, oh my God, like, oh shit. Constantly yelling at the TV.
Yeah, like I say in my book, it reminds me of the highway safety movies they showed you in driver's ed in high school, where, you know, like Signal 30, a real meat fest that my best girl, Makita Brotman, talks about in her book, Car Crash Culture. You have, on the one hand, it's sort of saying there's stuff you can do to avoid getting in an accident, but unfortunately, about half the accidents, there's nothing you can do to prevent them.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Whew. Anything else all of you want to say, speak now, forever, hold your peace on what worked for you about this film?
One thing I will say for the title threads that I'm only now just realizing it's something I never really connected to the title, but it definitely like works. So there's this scene towards the end where the kids are doing like arts and crafts, I guess. The children of the nuclear holocaust are doing some arts and crafts where they're taking old sweaters and unraveling them and then using that thread to make these sad little, like, I don't know, dream catcher, pot holder. I don't know what exactly the purpose it serves other than just like something to do. But it is basically like, once all of everything collapses, now we're all just like fighting over the garbage and seeing what we can make out of. Like, we gotta undo everything, and then we gotta use those threads to, but like, yeah. So anyway,
that reminds me of the moment when Ruth dies, that her daughter takes like the three items that have any significance, and they're basically trash, right? Like, it's like a totally mangled hairbrush and like a kind of a scarf, which is just like a remnant of something. And I can't remember what the third thing is that she takes, but
she's got
it's
a
all very
book
like
about birds.
She leaves the book.
She leaves the book.
She leaves the
yeah,
bird
she
book.
leaves the book.
She doesn't know Jimmy.
Right.
I don't know what
and probably
this book's
can't read anyway, so.
It's just, yeah.
She can't read anyway, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
But like this idea of like these items that either have some sort of meaning or functionality.
Right. Minimal utility.
Right. Yeah. The utility of it. Yeah. I found that particular moment too to just be like, oh God.
Right. Just that kind of putting you in the place of what do you take, what do you leave, what matters at all.
And the
do
emotion,
I have to brush my hair anymore?
The total lack of emotion that she has with Ruth dying too is just like, oh well, I better collect the things that are useful.
Ugh. Yes.
Ugh,
well,
is the
yeah,
that's right.
Leave it on that note. Yeah, it sounded like nothing else for you, Bob. Wanted to
I'm
say,
good. Yeah.
Great. Then in that case, we can find out if indeed there was anything else that did not work for us in our next section. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
Still mixed feelings on the title, Rachel? Or?
I'm coming around to it. I'm thinking about too. The thing about the title is that like when they start with the whole threads thing, it's like, well, it doesn't really like hook me in, but I can't really think of a better what would be the opening? Like, here's what would happen in a nuclear war. Like, that's not fun. That would be too on the nose. So but it's never been like my favorite thing in the movie, I guess I'll say.
Yeah.
Is the sort of like opening and like the title. I find a lot of the first half of the movie, it does a great job of slow building dread, but a lot of it just sort of washes over me. Like, I'm not really following super closely the sort of like Bob probably is following the like sort of political, like the specifics of anything that's going on, either with the characters or with like the building war. It's just sort of like they're all having these sort of sad little lives. Like, I mean, they're fine. They're great compared to the second half of the movie. And the scary shit is kind of building. Like the fact that dread is building is like 10,000 times more important than any of the specifics of the movie before the bomb goes off. And I don't really get hooked in until basically like the kind of the grocery store scene. Like it takes a while for me to get like really, really hooked into the movie. I think if I just watched the first like 10 to 20 minutes of the movie, I might be kind of like, and if I had gotten interrupted somehow, I might not have come back to it. But you know, don't go away, viewer. If you only watch 20 minutes of Threads, keep going. And I promise you'll get traumatized eventually if that's what you're after. If it's not what you're after, you probably shouldn't watch the movie. Yeah.
I kind of view it that same way, but I look at that more as like the kind of movie viewer I am, where it's almost like, you know, I don't really listen to the lyrics of a song until, you know, it takes me a while.
That's the thing, though. I usually listened. I'm usually very like, I'm very invested in this plot and character that probably isn't going to matter once people start dying. But like in this one, and I think they frankly do a very good job with like the characters. Like there's some good fun dialogue towards the beginning where the kid's like, "What's an abortion?" And like, I don't know. I don't. It's not like riveting like drama like the characters, but it's very believable, and that's the important thing.
Kitchen sink realism.
But like, do I care about the specifics of it? Probably not. Like, yeah.
I mean, I'd be curious and I guess surprised to hear anything for you, Bob.
Yeah. There's a happy thing that doesn't work, and there's a very sad thing that doesn't work for me.
Okay.
The happy thing that doesn't work is that, fortunately, the specific scenario in Threads is highly unlikely. That this is something I've learned from other Threads heads, that, you know, you can sort of see Mick Jackson's, you know, liberal paranoia about Ronald Reagan. And now I'm going with the part that Rachel ignored, you know, like the buildup in Iran. Even Reagan would never have front-loaded tactical nukes into a hot-button situation like that in the Middle East. Ironically, the day after's nuclear initiation scenario is more plausible because we did have Pershing intermediate nuclear missiles in West Germany. And so Berlin, that's also, you know, in the war game, you know, the Peter Watkins banned BBC documentary a decade earlier. It's a big influence on Threads. You know, both Peter Watkins and the day after posited a German crisis leading toward a nuclear exchange. And that actually is much more realistic. As the Threads heads say, though, we had to find some way to get the bombs falling. But Iran, fortunately, if you really know about where they were and stuff, there is a sort of, I mean, I never thought this, even like on the 10th viewing, it still scares the bejesus out of me. But there was indeed, people watching shouldn't be that worried about it. It's not that plausible a scenario for it. Like I say, that's the happy news. The bad news, is that this movie was intended to get us to abolish nuclear weapons, and it utterly failed. We still have them. True. We still have them, and I want to say just two things with my nuclear activist hat. The Journal of Atomic Scientists doomsday clock is at 100 seconds to midnight right now as we record this. And that is closer than it's been during the Cuban Missile Crisis, during the mishap in the 80s, Able Archer exercise of NATO when Russia thought we were invading them, and a few other things. So that's bad. Also, as we record this podcast, there are 5 places on the planet where a nuclear exchange could start. We know, obviously, Putin and Russia and Ukraine. China, both with Taiwan and their border with India and the stuff going on there. India and Pakistan, two nuclear powers that border each other. It'd be like if Canada had nukes and didn't like us, or Mexico had nukes and didn't like us. We've got North Korea, right? Never know what they're up to, but stuff about South Korea. And then we have Iran and Israel and, and all that stuff. So Mick Jackson really wanted this to make a difference. And we have the irony. Here's a fun fact. In January of 2021, the United Nations abolished nuclear weapons in the General Assembly. They signed off on that. And of course, all the actual nuclear powers said, we don't think we'll sign this treaty. So he didn't do it. And God, if Threads didn't do this, what the fuck? What kind of movie, the irony, as I talk about on The Day After, is Reagan doesn't like horror films, but he likes disaster movies. He watched The Day After, which is a disaster film, and he was like, I don't like nuclear weapons anyway. He almost, with Gorbachev, they almost got rid of all of them at Reykjavik, but they certainly got rid of the intermediate ones, a whole class of nuclear weapons. But if Threads can't get people, can't be in Uncle Tom's Cabin for nuclear disarmament, what will it take?
Yeah.
So I think the film on its own terms didn't succeed at what it wanted to do.
God. So just what worked for you, what did not work for you is that the film did not work in the most literal sense.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Man, that makes my what didn't work so lame.
Which is...
Go for it. Just edit me out.
No, there's correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be almost no orchestrated soundtrack music in this at all.
Chuck
Except
Berry
for
3 times and one piece of music.
There's one piece of music that I'm like, whoa, what, you're reminding me that I'm watching a movie. What are you doing? Why does that exist? It's so odd to me. And it stands out. And I'm like, what? I don't understand why they even did it. And I can't remember the exact moment that it happens, but it was super jarring. And I was like, what? It's happening. Why'd they do that?
That's a great
Other than that,
yeah.
Indeed.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's everything else, all the other music is diegetic. And then there's one non-diegetic thing.
Well, it's like the only thing in the movie that's like, we're going to add a little extra cue on how you're emotionally supposed to feel about this, in addition to just the off. You don't need it, Threads. You do not.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm like, you've got me emotionally queued up. You don't need to add to it. Thank you very much.
It'd be so much bleaker, without it. I feel like it's probably.
Yeah.
You know what? I bet if they didn't have the music in it, it would have abolished the nuclear.
Maybe they needed to put that in to get it screened.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's possible.
I mean, maybe some producer was like, guys,
lighten up.
People are going to kill themselves.
Right.
Put something in to remind them it's a movie.
That's something that doesn't work for me. So people need to be killing themselves after, nobody, you don't see any suicides after the bomb drops. You see nothing but reasons for suicide. I believe, obviously, the will to live is strong. I'm sure people will, but there must be whole classes of people that are just nah.
Absolutely.
And you just don't see any of them.
Well, we have that tight narrative focus on just those people.
It's true. That's fair. But I mean,
that would be another subplot
of suicide. Just encountering some evidence of suicide.
Well, and there is the shot of people who have been hanged. Right? We see their feet. Mm-hmm. But it's not. To me, it was implied that they were hanged by somebody else, by an authority, rather than they collectively chose to hang themselves. I don't think that was the intent.
I feel like hanging yourself isn't something you do in a group,
right. But if you're gonna show that that's happening, it's not like they were shying away from it or something.
Yeah.
would imagine, unless somebody was like really staunch about like, hey, we could show all of this really horrifying stuff,
Right,
but
but
like
no suicides.
suicide's a little much.
Come on, guys. We've got, it is very, it's very, even though there's stuff in there, like trading rats for sex and this girl getting like raped, but it's so squeamish about, it's so like very, just the hint. I didn't even know she was trading sex for a rat. It's like blink and you'll miss it. She just kind of like, he's just kind of like, and she's like, all right, fine. So you don't really necessarily know, if you're not paying the super closest of attention, you may not like catch some of these like details or like, I don't know. There are a handful of things that they're a little like shy about and many that they're not shy at all.
Maybe no suicide because of British pluck. That we're gonna endure.
Fair.
Yeah, we're going to get through this. We survived the Blitz. We'll survive this.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
They should have shown they still have their tea time. No
Right,
matter what.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, if only that guy had gotten some water, he could have made some tea with it. But alas.
Well, and everything's irradiated, so it's probably already hot. So you're good to go.
Exactly.
Great. I like what you said earlier, Rachel. If only they didn't have that music cue, then maybe we would have had nuclear disarmament.
That's what went wrong.
And more suicide.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, Bob, some of what you were already saying there is some fun things of note. So I'd love to move into that section if we're already here.
I have more.
Great. Here we go then. Things of note.
This should be interesting.
Well, just because you mentioned it earlier, I was curious. I thought it was really interesting how you said, Reagan saw the day after. But I thought it was so interesting how didn't that actually have an effect on him?
Yeah, there are multiple sources. I think I cite in my book Richard Rhodes's magisterial 4-volume history of the bomb as one, but everybody who was in the Reagan cabinet said it was the only time they ever saw Reagan depressed. After he saw an advanced screening in the theater, and then he said he went to a nuclear briefing, and he basically wrote in his diary that he thought these people were insane. It also shows up in his memoirs. But Reagan was deeply affected by the day after, but I don't think he got near Threads, which, like I joke in the book, it might as well have been directed by Jean-Luc Godard in terms of what Reagan likes in films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
too non-Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote down on page 31 of the book here, you said how after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that the primary, quote, utility of nuclear weapons has been to deter nuclear war, which just seems like one of those just like brain exploding things to me.
If we're
I don't
lucky,
know what I have
that's
to
what they
say
do.
about that, but
If we're lucky, that's what they do. On a good day, they deter nuclear war.
But
On a
I
bad
think
day,
that
they
just
don't.
captured that. But something about that just captured for me, like the not the contradiction, the fallacy, the what's that word I'm looking for? Just that it doesn't make any sense. It completely cancels itself out.
Paradox.
Like it's contradiction. Yeah, paradox. Thank you. It's an absolute paradox to me. God, I don't know. I forget why. If I had a question on that, I might have written it down. But blows my mind. Anything maybe outside of your book? That you wanted to mention? Yeah, there's some fun tidbits.
Outside, maybe overlapping a little bit, but still, I'll just throw these out. These are the 4 things of note I think anybody listening to the podcast, I would want to tell them. It's really weird Barry Hines, the writer, gets top credit over the director. That's the first thing you see. Threads, a film by Barry Hines, or a screenplay by Barry Hines. That tells you how big he was in the UK at the time. He got people interested. The second is you can see on YouTube the rough draft of this film is Mick Jackson's documentary, A Guide to Armageddon. That's like an hour long where he learned a lot about how to stretch a budget for burn effects and stuff. And that's pretty damn depressing in its own right, but it's it's sort of the prequel to Threads. Third thing for Stranger Things fan, I do mention this briefly in the book, there's Kate Bush, when her 1980 album, Never Forever, came out, she rather than going with Babushka or Army Dreamers, she insisted the first single be Breathing, which is her nuclear song. And I think the screenplay by Barry Hines does a kind of a shout out to it when Ruth is worried about the effects of cigarettes on her unborn baby and stuff, because the Kate Bush song is mainly anti-nuclear, but has a little thing about breathing my mother's nicotine, So I think there's a shout out to Kate. And finally, I would point out that I think it's hilarious that the movie that Mick Jackson did after this was The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston. Because he basically says on the on the director's commentary, I am so done with anything like Threads. I never want to even get near. And so there's this Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Hollywood and make this movie now.
And it was a hit. So.
Yeah, right. And you going from Threads to The Bodyguard, to me, is like cinematic whiplash. That's really
absolutely.
That is a huge.
It makes me realize, like, when you think about it, I don't know how long he sat in the editing bay, but like, just the idea of putting this movie together.
They say, he said it traumatized. It traumatized him for over a year. Over a year, he was in a very, very bleak place.
Damn.
Yeah.
I'd be curious. So, what was kind of the effect of this film coming out? What impact did it have on people? I mean, we mentioned, the night that Britain didn't sleep, but what kind of legacy or immediate reaction and now legacy has it had?
Well, it's been, again, because of Shudder and Severin, it's been kind of rediscovered.
Yeah, this definitely wasn't intended as a horror movie. And my feeling is that I didn't notice it pop up on Shudder until exactly beginning of the pandemic. I think there were a number of us horror fans at the beginning of the pandemic who were like, oh, yeah, like Nick and I were calling it like disaster porn, where we were just like, ooh, let's really watch some like very scary stuff. Like, I can't remember, Contagion or whatever. Like, let's watch.
Yeah, why did we do that? I watched Contagion at the beginning of the pandemic too, and I'm like, what am I doing?
Well, but that is I don't know. Like, I think it's like, I don't really think of myself as like, I always think of myself as the person who would like just kill themselves at the beginning of a zombie apocalypse, but I don't actually think I would.
The suicide angle. This is where it's coming from.
Well, there's been studies that people who were watching horror movies in the pandemic coped with the pandemic better than people who were just like avoiding that stuff, because there were a lot of people who did, and it's so and I think it's just sort of like, because again, coming back to like, oh, did this movie make you want to go out and get a survival kit? I was the person that when the stuff was going down with like Trump and Kim Jong-un, I was like, uh-oh, and started like for a good like few months was just looking up the DEF CON warning system every day to see what DEF CON level we're at, and like I Googled a little bit about like, what do you do?
Ordering the iodine pill.
Yeah, well, I was just made a little notebook, like if it goes up to like, it's at DEF CON 3, if it goes up to 2, maybe we'll make some thoughts about it. I hadn't actually checked into it. The last time I checked like a couple months ago, it was at like a 3 again. It had gone back down, and then it went back up to a 3 again. But it made me, even though so many things in Threads were so paralleling, like, uh-oh, and now all the groceries are gone. Or like, uh-oh, like we saw all these little warning signs and we're just like, it's just a flu. And then suddenly, uh-oh. But it didn't really make me feel more scared about COVID. It was just kind of like, it's like if things are going to get really, like if reality is going to get really scary, I at least want it to have a little fun with it. I do genuinely like being scared. So if reality is going to get really scary, like, let's just kind of lean into it. Let's just kind of enjoy that just the tiniest little bit. So, like, yeah, I don't know. It let me recontextualize reality as a horror movie for a short time, which was like a perversely, like, admittedly perverse, but like effective way for coping with pandemic for a while. So,
right.
Yeah.
The pandemic, it's only a movie. It's only a movie.
But like, it's so interesting that this wasn't built, like, that no one, it seems like it hadn't been, it was like, oh, now we're going to reclaim it as a horror movie. Because it so obviously was made to scare people, even though it wasn't. Like, what's the difference between a horror movie and a movie that was trying to scare you? And that's the whole goal.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, it would mainly show up, like, if I would go to, like, a Sane Freeze, anti-nuclear conference or something, and somebody would be saying, oh, man, have you ever seen The Day After? That's really a mindfuck. And it's like, you think that's bad? Yeah. It didn't get as much play here because, of course, it's Sheffield and not Kansas City,
Yeah.
Right. I wonder if it could be due for a theatrical re-release, some kind of limited release could be great. Yeah. At the same time, though, like what I was saying earlier, just putting that out there more in the world in a certain way.
Yeah. I say make new ones. We got new scenarios.
Yeah.
Let's make more.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always apocalyptic movies, but they're never nuclear apocalyptic movies. I think let's get
that was another question.
Like the Western.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that is kind of a question I had because in the book you kind of say this seems, maybe I'm putting words into your mouth here, but it kind of seems like the ultimate sort of say on nuclear disasters and just what the horror of the leading up and aftermath would be. But I don't know, could you all see that we could be helpful to have sort of a new film with the same themes being used?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we talked about this at the launch. I mean, it should be fresh. I don't think you should just remake Threads. The main thing you can take about is the low budget and the practical effects. It's interesting that Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is going to use practical effects versus CGI. I think that's the way to go for some reason. I get distanced by CGI nuke stuff.
It's not as visceral.
Sum of All Fears, T2, good stuff, but it doesn't do. Threads is worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For some reason.
The only
analog
CG
versus
nukes,
digital.
Right. The only CG nuke thing I'll defend is the one in Twin Peaks: The Return.
Nice. Oh yeah,
great.
Totally. That is. Oh, I forget. Obvious. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is part 6 of Twin Peaks: The Return. Greatest hour of television I ever saw.
Part 8. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Right. That's right.
Legendary
Yeah,
part
they cut
8.
it out. Yeah. Right. And you got 9 Inch Nails first, and then
Yeah. No, I think. But even if it's not direct remake, I think, like you said, low budget would make a lot of sense, and then just to take more from its pages would be non-actors for this kind of film. I don't know, so I hope it would
no star power.
Take what would work. But I mean, at the same time, though, this was so entirely effective for me. Like, I don't know, it's just like show this more at the same time.
Sure,
I don't know.
Sure, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Do both.
Yeah.
Make new ones. Show this one.
Yeah.
Did you all see it was like within the last year, and this is where like I think it got to me honestly even more than like pandemic stuff, just sort of the world reacting to it. But there was like in the last year, I guess when the sort of maybe the Ukraine conflict started up, but like a New York like official made PSA that was basically an update on the duck and cover thing. Did you guys see that?
Oh, have not had the pleasure.
It was like as like a PSA that I think was like being shown just in like subways or around. I don't know. It was like made for New Yorkers. Like, here's what to do in nuclear blast. I don't know. Like, look it up now.
Okay, is it on YouTube?
Yeah, I assume so. All
right.
99% sure it's real.
I think I know what you're talking about because my girlfriend Britt is like extremely anxious about she wouldn't watch this movie. Like, I told her what we were watching and she's like, nope, like I can't do that.
Nope.
Because she'll get down these little rabbit holes of these like apocalyptic scenarios. And I think she was telling me recently that she had seen a thing that was going through what you need to do if a nuclear bomb hits, like in the moments that it hits, like the actions you need to take in that moment. So maybe that's what she saw.
Yeah, it's like as horrifying as this film was, something about seeing that PSA, it's like the PSA is still scarier. Like, I think, what are the different terms you use, Bob? Like, one is stoic acceptance as just sort of reactions to...
Versus cautionary, Does it make you want to... Can you stop it, or do you just have to roll with it?
Yeah.
Right. So I think even though this is still a film enough, I'm able to... stay out of the idea of acceptance. It's still a movie on some level, as much as it does and did get to me. But something about seeing a real life like PSA, 99% sure is real. Boy, that actually scared me even more than this film.
As it should have.
Who decided to do? Oh God, I'll try to find it and share it with you guys. A lot of fun.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, that'll be fun for us.
Fun.
Right, and then just another thing I thought was really interesting, not sure what to say on it, but you sort of point out in the end of the book this, that there's a linkage between the idea of the bomb and conception. Where did that kind of come from, and what were you saying about that?
Well, I'll give you a really weird, I worked for a couple decades with a photographer, and one of the things on nuclear stuff, one of the things we noticed, we were going out in the missile fields in North Dakota, you would find these ICBM silos, and right next to them would be these giant pro-life baby billboards. And the first time we saw that, we thought, that's interesting. The 50th time we saw that, we thought, what the fuck is going on here? And I think that, in a way that sort of tied in there, that I think it's because, I noticed that scientists refer to nuclear weapons as an existential weapon, which is a really interesting way to put it. That the gravity of the threat that this kind of device gives us makes us think paradoxically of continuity in life and conception and all these, that somehow it's the good old Freudian, eros and thanatos, like it's the dialectic between these two. And so, to put it as plain language as possible, when we think about the deathliness of the bomb, we worry about life and how life is going to work. And the day after sort of, skims the surface of that, and Threads does the multi-generational deep dive. So I think it's somehow the bomb leads us to think of the opposite of the bomb. And like I say, what's really weird is that's what they said when the Trinity test, they sent a telegram about the results of the test to Truman using coded I think maybe General Leslie Groves, using coded language of birth. That, the baby's born, you could hear the screams this far, how long the sound carried. It's in the book, but it was very weird that was how they branded the bomb at the moment of its first successful test.
That is kind of, getting at whatever was coming up for me, just this, when you think of the Star Child at the end of 2001, there's something about the idea of a child being born that is like just the most powerful thing in a way. Yeah.
And by the way, in the Arthur C. Clarke novelization of 2001, the first thing that kid does is detonate, like in the scenario of that world, they have orbiting nuclear weapons and the kid explodes them. That's in the novel.
Great.
That almost says it, whatever we may be trying to get at here. Just thought, I don't know, it's just super interesting too, the idea that they're opposite extremes in a way of like destruction and creation, but then at the same time, they're both the same and not contradictions, and just this idea of an expulsion of energy itself. So I don't know, but that is really interesting. Any questions for our author here, Tim, or Rachel here? You have?
No, nothing specific.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, though, for you, Bob. I thought it was really interesting how you were a fan of Robert Heinlein. You said you loved Robert Heinlein in the book.
Yeah.
Why is that, and do you think that connects to your love of this film, Threads?
Well, Robert Heinlein is one of the most interesting and constantly changing his mind, occupying all sorts of contradictory ideological positions simultaneously. I think he's just a great American thinker and writer, and my significant other got me as a birthday present the complete Heinlein hardbound, like all 57 volumes, the Virginia edition. I've been working through it. I'm about volume 24, but I first ran into Heinlein because of his his really batshit ideas about really wanting to get us ready to fight a nuclear war for a while. And of course, Starship Troopers, kind of came out of that moment. And then he did 180 with Stranger in a Strange Land. He's fascinating to me. And I admire people who aren't afraid to change their minds in public a lot. And his positions are always interesting. He's fun to read and argue with. There's no way I've never met anybody who could agree on everything he ever said, including probably him, But I love the guy. And but if you want to get the really weird Cold War Heinlein, I mentioned in the book Farnham's Freehold, where he actually says a nuclear war is going to be a good thing because it's going to kill the dumb people and the smart people. It'll really be the survival of the intellectually fittest because they'll be ready for it, which is like, damn, dog, what do you make of that? But it's fascinating.
Yeah,
Jeez.
I mean, I hate to say it, but, intelligence isn't genetic. So, there's always going to be dumb people.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry,
it reminds
Bob.
me of
Sorry, Bob Heinlein.
Tommy Chong. I had the pleasure of meeting him, and he said how cats, street cats who survive are the ones who are very, very smart. That is a sign of intelligence of animals that can survive in the streets, dogs and cats.
So Tommy Chong and Robert Heinlein are
Yeah.
in agreement.
All right. I like ending on that note here for threads and nuclear war and all that. So let's wind down here with some quick recommendations just to kind of ease out, see what else is all on our mind and spirits here. Rachel, that was not your recommendation, Beavis and Butthead, Do America.
Oh, come on.
As great as
It
that
should
was.
be.
So what's the other one you came prepared with you'd like to share?
I've been thinking about it, and I think if you like Threads, you would like Martyrs, weirdly, the French horror, because it is a if you love being traumatized, and you love a horror movie, that's just gonna keep getting worse.
Yeah, and you all did a great podcast on that. Shout out to you guys on that one, Ryan and Tim.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to ask you, because you said that Threads was one of your top three. Is Martyrs one of the other top three? Or
the other two are Carrie and Midsommar. So yeah, but those are, there's.
But those are cheerful movies. A lot of
happy ending.
I was always my friends, some of my friends will be like, well, Midsommar really traumatized. They're not horror movie people. They're like, Midsommar really traumatized me. And I'm like, I find it weirdly comforting. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's one of my
favorite peaceful. I expected to be traumatized because that was my other one that I was like, well, if you like being traumatized, Hereditary will probably do it for you. Because that one.
I tried to put that on the other day, and Britt was like, no.
That did traumatize me and that was one where, just like Threads, I watched it at the time of maximum terror because I had just gotten into a very bad car accident and was like recovering from it, and it really got into me, got into my bones. But that's another one that is pretty brutal. Is a pretty brutal. Like the world you're existing in is not a fun world.
Yeah, Martyrs, that was episode 77. Tim and I dismembered it, and it was our first time seeing it. And actually, it was on the tip of my tongue this whole episode, so I'm glad you mentioned it here.
Excellent.
Great podcast, great film.
Excellent.
Great. Okay, I'll just get mine out of the way really, really quick here. I needed some, maybe after this film or whatever, or this was all on my mind. I needed some what's my go-to comfort food movies. I revisited for the first time in so long something near and dear to me when I was young, and that was Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. Specifically, the sequel. It cracked me up as much as ever. Recommend dead that if it's been a while. Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. Tim, how about you?
I will go away from the bleakness as well, and I just watched Glass Onion, the sort of sequel to Knives Out, and it's fun. It's kind of what you expect with a murder mystery thing. Not what you expect, but you know what you're getting into, and it's complex and funny, and it does a good job of misdirecting you as you might want. So
great.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right, and Bob, last but not least.
Yeah, I got a couple here. In terms of films, I give a lot of love in Chapter 2 for a reason to These Are the Damned, Joseph Losey's Hammer horror film, which my hot take is that it's part of a kind of a loose trilogy with Village of the Damned and Children of the Damned. If they box them together, they'd call it Those Damned Kids. It does a really great job of capturing, but it's very unlike the other two in the series. It does an incredible job of capturing the psychological freakiness of growing up in the Cold War for those who grew up, who were born after it. The other text I also mention only in a end note that's equally bizarre is 1964's United Nations special, which has been they show it on TCM now occasionally, and it's on YouTube. In fact, both of these are on YouTube. Carol for Another Christmas, which is the other 1964 nuclear movie with Sterling Hayden and Peter Sellers. And
I've heard of this.
I know, it is a gem. It is a jewel, and it's phenomenally strange. Mankiewicz wrote the screenplay. Rod Serling had some hand in it, but anyway, and it's a retelling of Dickens' Christmas Carol, but with obviously bring in nukes, and you have an idea about the ghost of Christmas future, right? That's
Great.
all I'm saying. I want to shout out to two for Threads heads. Two other interested parties, two other great nuclear-themed podcasts, Shelley Lesher's My Nuclear Life and Tim Westmeyer's Supercritical podcast, both of which also, in very different ways than we're doing, talk about threads. And then lastly, I'd say, as an English prof, the wonderful world of nuclear literature, fiction, and nonfiction awaits you. The book I'm reading now that really is rocking my world is Denise Kernan's The Girls of Atomic City, which is about the women who worked at Oak Ridge. It reads like a novel. It's a page-turner. It's not technical. It's delightful, and it puts a human face on this rather strange stuff.
Cool. Great. And then I wanted to both recommend and recommend Dead again, why we have you two here, not just to talk to you, but we just wanted to tell everyone about not just Die Books is the book series that's coming out. Which this is the first one of the first release. We have coming up also in this first batch of books, Poltergeist, The Wolfman, Sleepaway Camp, and The Love Witch. So hopefully that's not in reverse there. I'm showing it for our YouTube audience. Rachel, anything else you can tell us about the series and then where to get the books and all that?
Indeed. Yes. So again, just every book is going to be by a different author about a different horror movie. And it's really just, we really give the authors like complete free reign to like just go nuts, whatever their personal obsessions, interests, whatever, like background research, whatever they want to bring to the party, just like run at that as hard as they possibly can. And Bob was sort of the perfect candidate for for doing that. He's just exceptional. The research in the level of knowledge you will get from reading this book, like anything you could possibly ever want to know about threads and nuclear war history. I won't say anything a person who's not Bob, because I'm sure he's got plenty more to say that didn't make it in. I know he's got more to say than because we cut quite a bit from the book.
They'll let you go nuts, but they will draw you back a little bit.
We're pulling you back in. They're still, at the end of the day, they're relatively short, punchy books. And we really just, we also kind of want to go really like crazy with like we always kind of want to go, like sometimes we'll have a thing where we went to Bob and we're like, would you like to write about this very specific movie because we think you'd really crush it. But other times we'll just like find like an author or someone like we, Gory Corey of Gory Corey's blog. We saw one of her, she had like that sort of viral article or blog post that came out, and Shudder kind of re-amplified it about like, give us some Gen Z horror movies, which I feel like they have kind of now. But we saw that and we were like, all right, let's get this girl. Let's see what she wants to write about. So sometimes we'll just run at people and just be like, what do you want to give us? And we ended up with some good ones that way, I think. But other times, like the Sleepaway Camp is going to be good. It's from the Colangelos, BJ and Harmony. Colangelo had both written about it separately. They are two women who are married, and Harmony's trans, so they both have very like specific like reactions to like Sleepaway Camp. We've got opinions about this movie, but they love it. It's a sort of warts and all like reading of that, or like I don't know. Matt who wrote The Love Witch has seen it. Oh God. So many times that we went to see it in theaters and we were like, I know he's seen it like 5 times in theaters already, so surely we shouldn't call Matt to see if he wants to come with us. And then we went and he was there at the theater. And that was when it was still in theaters, so he's seen it many times since then. We're like, man, Matt's so obsessed with this movie, he's got to do it. And
so being excited about all these, where can I find out more about them and look and get them?
DieDieBooks.com. Not live yet, but it will be by the time this podcast at the time of this recording. It is still being tooled, but at the time of this being live, like DieDieBooks.com, and you'll be able to buy Bob's book in all of its paperback or
ebook.
Glory. And all that. That's the other thing I want to play. These books look amazing. All the cover art is done by Andy Scatso, who does some very good like art, just like hand like drawn artwork, which is like super cool for all of the covers. We wanted to really invest in that, and like I don't know, the books look sweet. And
even the physical books themselves make me want to collect them all. And then so they're just going to be slowly released over the next year. Slowly released over the next year, and then hopefully we'll have the new batch ready to go and Kickstarter in end of 2023. That's the goal. Great. So DieDieBooks.com.
Books. Yeah.
Die as in live or die. DieDieBooks.com.
DieDieBooks.com.
All right. Well, Rachel and Bob, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Thank you guys, and for all you do with the podcast.
Just try to keep the love alive.
That's right. Yeah.
The
I think you still
love.
have about 9,000 horror films left to do.
No kidding.
Get cracking,
One
guys.
at a time.
Come on.
Corpse Grinders, Ted V. Mickle.
It's kind of on that note then, in closing, let's all weave some good threads here for ourselves and everyone. Thanks for listening.
Yep,
right.
and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Happy New Year.